A millionaire looked me in the eye, pointed at my mother with a smirk, and said, if she could translate Mandarin, he'd hand her his vice president title and pay for my college. He said it like a joke, like humiliation was a party trick. If it were you, would you have walked into that room with 5 minutes on the clock and your mother's dignity on the line? My name is Letitia. I'm 22, and that morning I was standing in the hallway of a Beverly Hills mansion with a backpack that still smelled like espresso from my overnight bakery shift, watching a room full of powerful men laugh at the idea that a black maid might be more than furniture. The conference room was glass and marble and quiet money orchids so white they almost hummed, the kind of place where whispers cost more than rent. At the head of the table sat Mr. Chen, a billionaire from Shanghai, who had just spoken for several minutes in Mandarin, precise and controlled, while the Americans nodded politely and understood nothing. Their interpreter had canceled last minute, the deal was wobbling, and instead of finding a solution, the vice president, Ricardo, decided to make sport of my mother Carmen, who'd served coffee in that house for 7 years without ever being seen. Here's the thing, people forget about rooms like that. The air is thin with politeness and thick with ego. Ricardo clapped his hands and said, fine, then if the maid can translate, I'll give her my job. Laughter even from the security guard trying not to smile. William Thompson, the owner, let out that nervous little chuckle people do when millions are evaporating and pride is the only umbrella. I felt my fists close in my sleeves, nails against skin, to keep my face calm. I had practiced that calm. For 3 years, I set my alarm for 4 a.m., studied Mandarin before dawn, drilled tones on a fogged bathroom mirror so I wouldn't wake my mom, memorized honorifics on the bus, saved for textbooks, watched free lectures on my cracked phone, and learned not just words but the bones of the culture, when to hold eye contact, when to let silence work for you, how accuracy is a love language in Chinese business. People love to say, opportunity knocks. Mine never knocked. I built a door. Mr. Chen spoke again in Mandarin, not raising his voice, but he didn't need to. I understood every syllable. He said dignity isn't a strategy, it's a standard. He said he couldn't partner with people who turned employees into props. He said he grew up poor, his own mother cleaned other people's homes, and if someone didn't show competence in 5 minutes, he was gone. 5 minutes. That's what I had. Pattern interrupt right here. 5 minutes is both a lifetime and no time at all. The room didn't know it yet, but the clock had started. Outside the door, I clocked a detail. On a side table sat Mr. Chen's document folder, slightly open, 2 pages fanned. I'm not a thief, but I can read a number from across a room, and something snagged my brain. A yuan to dollar conversion that didn't land right. Not a big margin, but off. I opened my notes app, snapped 2 quick photos, and told my heartbeat to slow down. You know that feeling when the math whispers a different story than the pitch deck? Yeah, that happened. Inside, Ricardo kept pushing. He told my mother to go on and say anything in Chinese like this was karaoke and not a contract. Mr. Chen's face hardened. My mom lowered her eyes the way she does when survival wants to be invisible. I stepped through the door before fear could vote. Excuse me, I said. Because respect is a key that fits most locks, I'm here to solve your communication problem. Heads snapped. Ricardo looked at me like I'd tracked gravel onto his marble. William blinked as if I'd appeared out of fog. My mother stared at me, half pride, half panic. I turned to Mr. Chen, dipped my head slightly, and in Mandarin apologized for the disrespect he'd endured and offered professional translation so we could proceed properly. The air changed. He asked where I learned. Los Angeles, I said, but with intention. He nodded, a micro smile, relief slipping around his eyes. I switched to English for the Americans because clarity is mercy. Mr. Chen gave you 5 minutes. We're in minute 3. Here's what he said a moment ago. And I translated line by line, no flourish, no embellishment. The disappointment, the story of his mother, the standard of dignity, the ultimatum. Watching those words land was like watching ice crack, quiet, but irreversible. Ricardo tried to laugh, but the laugh didn't come. He sputtered that I was making it up. I tapped my phone. I'm not stupid. When a man in a tailored suit starts turning people into punchlines, I hit record. I played back his own voice, thin but clear, promising in front of a room that if anyone could translate what Mr. Chen said, he would give up his position and pay my college. A bet is a bet. He slammed the table, barked private conversation like it was a spell. Public meeting, I said, multiple witnesses, your words. And I kept my voice even because the first one to yell loses. Quick pause. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. I turned back to Mr. Chen and in Mandarin asked permission to point out a small discrepancy on page 23 of his draft. He passed me the paper. I showed him the conversion, the rounding that didn't track the final figure that drifted. He checked the math. His eyebrows rose. Not because I'd caught him out, because I'd offered precision without performance. That's a different kind of respect. He said, still in Mandarin, what else do you have? So I showed him the little thing I'd built over sleepless weeks. A capstone app designed for Sino-American negotiations. Not a toy translation widget. An assistant that listens maps, tone, and etiquette flags. Cultural nuance reminds you when to hold the silence, when to summarize when a direct no is going to backfire, and when to propose a face-saving pivot. It doesn't replace people. It protects respect. Ricardo scoffed. William leaned in like a man who had just found a fire extinguisher in a room smelling like smoke. Mr. Chen switched to English so no one would miss the point. How much, he asked, flat, curious. I told him, shaking exactly 0 the price for an exclusive license to his group, my yearly consulting rate, the all-in package if he wanted cultural protocol management across the Americas. He didn't blink. Deal, he said, and that was the moment the table flipped. Twist delivered. The man they thought was the audience became the partner, the witness became the lead. Then he did something no one expected. He looked at William and said, still in English, for the room, I will proceed with Thompson Enterprises on one condition. She leads every discussion that involves me. Not she assists, not she sits in the back, and nods, she leads. William looked at me, then at Ricardo, who was flushing like a sunset you don't trust. You could see him measure the old rules against the next era. He breathed in and for once didn't look for a safer word. Ricardo, he said quiet as a closing door, you're fired. Do you think that's fair? The man who made the public bet has to live with the public outcome. Or do you think the rules change when it's your friend on the line? Be honest. Ricardo tried to bargain with yesterday. He talked about 8 years of contracts about loyalty. But loyalty without integrity is just habit with a nice suit. Mr. Chen didn't wait for the pleading. He tilted his head at me, a tiny nod toward the space where power used to sit. Ask him, he said. So I did. Your office keys and access card, please. He stared at my hand like it was a trap. It wasn't. The keys hit my palm. The room heard the sound. What happened next wasn't cinematic. It was work. We reset the conversation and did what should have been done from the start. I translated what needed precision. I paused so Mr. Chen could consider. I gave William a look when he started to fill a silence that didn't need filling, and we walked through the numbers until everything landed right. No fireworks, no speeches, just competence doing what competence does. My mother stood in the doorway for a while, then I told her softly to take a break, grab water, breathe. For the first time in 7 years, she stepped out of a room before anyone told her she could. After we signed, Mr. Chen shook my hand with both of his and said something I keep tucked inside my rib cage. He said he grew up the child of a maid too, that the fastest route to humility is to notice who cleans up your mess, that respect is cheaper than arrogance and pays better. He formalized his condition in writing. I would be his counterpart for all future dealings with the company, by name, not by title. William signed not because he was doing charity, because he recognized leverage used with discipline. Let me fast forward, but not too far. 6 months later, I was Vice President of International Relations at Thomson. My app was licensed to a handful of multinationals. Nothing overnight, because nothing honest is. And my first internal push was for a role. The org chart had never considered a quality supervisor for staff as someone tasked with raising standards for how we treat people who keep the place alive. My mother took that job not as a favor on merit. We opened a free language school in an old church basement near our neighborhood, donated tablets and a real whiteboard, and the first time a janitor corrected my tones in front of 20 teenagers, I laughed so hard I almost cried. Respect goes both ways. Yeah, that happened. And Ricardo, I know you want to know. One Thursday he came back in a suit that fit like a memory asked for anything. A recommendation, a warm word, a bridge. I met him in the lobby, shook his hand and told him what I'm telling you now. Second chances are earned, not demanded. Apologies are a beginning, not a transaction. He walked out slower than he walked in. Do you think I was too harsh? Or do you think boundaries are a form of kindness? Tell me where you land. People will tell you that merit always wins. I don't believe that. I think merit wins when it's prepared and when someone in power chooses to see it, and when you refuse to let humiliation have the last word. That's the part that stings right. We love a Cinderella headline because it lets us pretend the system is fair. But my mother had been excellent for years, and nobody noticed until a billionaire was insulted and a student spoke Mandarin. That's a hard sentence to swallow. Maybe sit with it. Maybe that discomfort is the start of something honest. If it were you in that hallway, would you have gone in? Would you have risked public failure to stop a public humiliation? Or would you have played it safe and told yourself the world doesn't change in 5 minutes? I didn't know it would work. I just knew silence wasn't neutral anymore. Not for me. And here's a smaller truth inside the big one. I didn't take that job to be a prodigy. I took it to keep the door propped open for the next person who needs 5 minutes and a voice that doesn't shake. Let me answer the question people ask me the most. Do I regret playing that recording? No. I didn't weaponize his words. I honored them. He made a promise out loud because he believed it would never cost him. Words without weight are just noise. He gave them weight when he turned them into a bet. I gave them consequence when I refused to let them evaporate. The photo on my office shelf isn't me in a blazer under a chandelier. It's my mother's hands rolling dough on a Sunday flower, in the line's strength, in the tenderness. Those hands raised me. Those hands earned this room as much as my study notes did. When I switch between Mandarin and English in a meeting, when I say slow down, let's check the math, when I shut down a joke that turns a person into a punchline, I'm not performing. I'm paying a debt to dignity. So let's open the door to the messy part, the social part. Should a public bet carry public consequences, no matter your salary, your skin, your school? Should a company put respect in the contract, the way it puts in delivery dates and penalties? Should a maid's daughter have to speak a billionaire's language to be seen as credible? Or should dignity be the baseline and competence the differentiator, not the entry fee? Do you think that's fair? If it isn't, what would you change, first the rules or the people who write them? I'll end where the day began, with a question that still hums under my skin. What are you preparing for, and when the moment comes, will you be ready to knock and walk, in steady voice, clear eyes, keys landing in your palm, because you made the words mean something? If this story sparked a thought or an argument, drop it in the comments. If you were me, what would you have done if you were William? What would you have decided if you were Ricardo? Would you have kept the bet when it cut the wrong way? Like the video, if you believe competence should speak louder than ego, subscribe. If you want more true stories from rooms where deals actually get saved, and tell me where you're watching from, because I want to know who I'm talking to. Share your own moment of being underestimated, and then over-delivering. Make it real, make it specific, because somewhere out there, a kid is waking up at 4 a.m. to build a door, and your story might be the knock they finally hear.